As most of you know, for the last several months on Communion Sunday, we've been extending our celebration of the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, and so we'll be taking a break from the book of Romans today to do that once again. Last November, we saw that the cross is really at the heart of the Reformation. In so many ways, a theology of the cross, as Luther called it, rather than the theology of glory that the Roman Catholic Church focused on. And under it all, we celebrate that theology, the theology of the cross, every Communion Sunday. It's so deep and it's so rich that you can't possibly exhaust it. And one of the things that the theology of the cross means is this, that by comparison to what Christ has done, compared to the work of redemption, our work is rest. Our work is rest. And the bottom line of what that means is this, is what R.A. Torrey said. He said, your religion is do, do, do. In many ways, that was the essence of Roman Catholicism. Your religion is do, 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 he said, but he went on to say, my religion is done, 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 which in many ways is the essence of the Protestant Reformation. So what's your religion like? What's your life like? Is it do, do, do? Or under it all, is it done, done, done? Of course, it didn't begin with the Reformation. It began with the creation, because what God did as our Redeemer was merely, we're going to see today, a continuation of what he had always been doing as our Creator and as our Sanctifier, as Luther and Calvin focused on in many ways, especially Calvin. It's always been the case that by comparison to his work, our work is rest. Compared to what God did as the Creator, compared to what he is doing as the Sustainer, compared to what he did as our Redeemer, compared to what he is doing as our Sanctifier, our work is rest. It's really what you might call the Protestant rest ethic. And it's so important that we memorialize it, or we need to, once a week on the seventh day, on Sunday, when we truly rest. But it's something we can carry with us all through the week, as we're going to see today. The Protestant rest ethic. And to enter into that rest, all I have to do is believe rather than living as though it all depends on me. I've been really working on this recently. It's a spiritual understanding that results in an ongoing psychological mindset, one that's of shattering and disarming simplicity, but so often so hard to maintain. It's a childlike faith that can take the weight of the world off your shoulders, the Protestant rest ethic, and bring rest to your soul. That's a good part of the teaching in Hebrews 4. And having read it earlier today in the New American Standard Version, I'd like to read it again in the New Living Translation. And as I read, see if that doesn't make you want to find the place of rest. First, we'll read about it, and then we'll look at how to enter into it. Again, starting in verse 1 of chapter 4. God's promise of entering his rest still stands. So we ought to tremble in fear that some of you might fail to experience it. For this good news, that God has prepared this rest, has been announced to us just as it was to them. But it did them no good, because they didn't share the faith of those who listened to God. For only we who believe can enter this rest. As for the others, God said, in my anger I took an oath, they will never enter my place of rest. Even though this rest has been ready since he made the world. We know it is ready because of the place in the Scriptures where it mentions the seventh day. On the seventh day, God rested from all his work. But in the other passage, God said, they will never enter my place of rest. So God's rest is there for people to enter. But those who first heard this good news failed to enter because they disobeyed God. So God set another time for entering his rest, and that time is today. God announced this through David much later in the words already quoted. Today, when you hear his voice, Don't harden your hearts. Now, if Joshua had succeeded in giving them this rest, God would not have spoken about another day of rest still to come. So there is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter into that rest. But if we disobey God, as the people of God of Israel did, we will fall. There's a lot here. This chapter and the one that comes before it would take months to go through, just like we're taking months to go through the various chapters of Romans. But there are two doctrines that these two chapters are built on and that are fundamental to the Protestant rest ethic. To enter into his rest, all you need, according to the book of Hebrews, is faith, which according to Hebrews 11 is a conviction. Really, it's a simple realization that can only come from God's revelation. In this case, it's a realization, as we're going to see today, that you're in the arms of a God who is sovereign. Sovereign through the creation, and he's sovereign through redemption. First, the creation. You see this in verses 3 and 4 of chapter 4. It says, "For only we who believe can enter his rest. As for the others, God said, in my anger I took an oath, they will never enter my place of rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world." The idea is this: rest, it was available to them when he finished the creation, but they didn't enter into it. And again, the New Living Bible translates it, this rest has been ready since he made the world. We know it is ready because of the place in Scriptures where it mentions the seventh day. On the seventh day, God rested from his work. Now, the idea here is this: because of the finished work of the creation of the Creator, the creation can be a place of rest for the creature and especially for the Christian. God did all the work as the Creator, and then he rested from that work, and so it is done, done, done. And now he's the sustainer of that finished creation in whose arms we can rest. That's the first thing when it comes to the Protestant rest ethic. This harkens back, and we got to understand this in the context of Hebrews. It harkens back to the very beginning of the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews 1:1, if you'll turn there. Hebrews 1:1, where he says, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and in the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. Made, past tense. This is the finished work of the Creator. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and he upholds all things by the word of his power. This is the ongoing work of the sustainer. Putting it all together, chapter 1 and chapter 4, what's being taught here is this: now that the creation is done, it can be a place of rest. Through it all, thanks to the work of the Creator, we can rest in the arms of the sustainer, of the one who holds all things by the word of his power. He's all around us. Under all our burdens, heavy or light, he's bearing us up. He's bearing us up as easily as a battleship. The ocean bears a battleship as easily as it does a fishing boat. Now, you see this all through Scripture. In Psalm 67, it says he keeps us in life. In Isaiah 46, it says that he's borne us from our mother's womb. In Acts 17, Paul says that in him we live and move and have our very being. Psalm 71:6, by thee have I been sustained from my birth. By him all things were created, Colossians 1:17. And in him all things hold together. That's Hebrews 1 and 2. Including you and me. The eternal God is a dwelling place. This is one of my favorites. Deuteronomy 33:27. And underneath are the everlasting arms. And that's not even scratching the surface of what he's doing on every level, from the micro to the macro, from the atomic, all the way to the galactic. He's got the whole world in his hands, including you and me, brother. You and me, sister. I'll never forget the day that God led me there to that place of rest. It gave me a homing instinct that to go back there again and again. It was 25 years ago. We were ministering. It was our first senior pastorate in Estes Park, Colorado. It's when we were still raising our kids. And, as I said, as our first senior pastorate, I really wanted to prove myself. And it was it was a fleshly pressure, but it was there. And I was getting pretty tired to the point that everything seemed hard, including like brushing my teeth. You know how sometimes it is when you're on tilt. Usually when I wake up in the morning, I'm raring and ready to go, but sometimes it can become such a labor. It felt so much work just to get out of the house. Ever felt that way? How much work goes into just getting to work, especially if you have kids at home? I mean, you got to wake up, and that can be hard enough, and sometimes you even wonder whether to get up, but you have a job, you've got kids, or whatever, and you usually end up deciding you don't really have much of a choice about getting up, especially if your parents have anything to say about it, if you're still at home. And so you get out of bed, make the bed, at least some people do, go out and take a run, as I used to do all the times until my knees got too bad to do that, come back and take a shower, floss the teeth, brush the teeth, look in the mirror, look away from the mirror, comb the hair, or at least I used to. Things do get easier in some ways. Trim the beard, apply the deodorant, decide what to wear, which has got to be one of my least favorite activities in the whole wide world. It's right up there with shopping for clothes, as Julie will tell you. I get angry when I have to shop for clothes. I don't like it for some reason. Get dressed, only to hear those dreaded words, Brian, it doesn't match. I've got to work on my sanctification when I hear those words. Decide what to eat, which used to be and is one of my least favorite activities. So, it's right up there with looking for the keys. And so sometimes Julie hears those dreaded words, Julie, where are the keys? And one day they were in my pocket. Another day I was holding them. Some of you know about this. One day I said, Julie, where are my glasses? And her eyes widen. She looks at me, and they're right on my head. Drive to the office, drive back home because I forget the briefcase or the letter she said you wanted me to make sure I mailed. Sometimes, someday your work hasn't even begun, and you're already tired. So what's to be done? Well, at one of those times I learned a lesson that I'll never forget. I learned about a simple realization that can lighten your load. One morning, as I was under all that, kind of on tilt, the whole room was suddenly like aglow with the beams of the rising sun. And it's like they were kissing my face. And I looked out the window at the sun cresting over one of the mountains, and I thought, he does that every day. Not just for a few decades like with me and my work, but since the beginning of the creation. And I felt the earth under my feet, and I remembered Psalm 119, a verse in there that I memorized long ago. You have established the earth, and it abides. The world is firmly established. It will not be moved. And I felt strong standing there. Not because of me, but because of the earth. And there was, just outside the window, Long's Peak, 2 miles away, all 14,000 feet of her. And Meeker Mountain and Twin Sisters and the Mummy Range, all these magnificent works of his. And here I was with this tremendous, labor of having to brush my teeth again. There was frost that was covering the lower half of the window, like this fine etching. And beyond that, there was this blanket of snow that was glistening in the morning light like a field of diamonds. unbelievable. And a herd of elk was grazing in our backyard, and the deer had just come through, and now they were down having a drink at Fish Creek. For he causes the grass to grow, Psalm 104:14. He sends forth springs to the valleys. They flow between the mountains to give drink to every beast of the field. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of his hands. I felt like, look at the birds of the air. Consider the lilies, O you of little faith. Therefore do not be anxious. Felt like I sing the mighty power of God who made the mountains rise. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars and their courses above join with all nature in manifold witness to his great faithfulness, mercy, and love. All I have needed, thy hands hath provided. You know what? He is serving up the whole world, our very lives, even the air we breathe, on the table he's prepared for us. All that we have needed, his hand has provided like on a silver platter. And all we have to do is live through a simple faith realization that you are in the arms of a God who is sovereign. Sovereign in the creation. And there's so much there. We've just scratched the surface. But also sovereign in redemption. By comparison to what he has done as the creator and is doing as the sustainer, our work is rest. And just as much, if not more, by comparison to what he did as our Redeemer and is doing to this day, our work is rest. Which is the second thing. Back to Hebrews. The foundation for our rest is the doctrine of creation. And on that foundation, according to these chapters in Hebrews, is the doctrine of redemption. Because not only is God our creator and our sustainer, he's our redeemer. While sustaining us, if that weren't enough, he redeems us again and again and again after having redeemed us at the cross. Just as he did the children of Israel. It's in the chapter just before, Hebrews 3:9, if you'll turn there, where he says, your fathers tried me by testing me with their unbelief, though they saw my works for 40 years. These are not his works of creation, obviously, that he's talking about, but his works of redemption. They failed to believe in his works of redemption, like parting the Red Sea, like water from the rock, like, manna from heaven, and on and on and on. They failed to believe in his works of redemption at the next trial or tribulation they went through, and so they failed to enter into the promised land, the land of rest. And we too have seen his works, his acts of deliverance, many of us for 40 years, if not longer. God himself summed up these works that it's talking about in Hebrews with a single, powerful, and unforgettable picture. It's in Exodus 19:4, when he said, I bore you as on eagle's wings. I bore you as on eagle's wings. It's also in Deuteronomy 32:10 when he says, he found them in a desert land and in the howling waste of a wilderness. He encircled them. He cared for them. He guarded them as the pupil of his eye. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that hovers over its young, he spread his wings and caught them. He carried them on his pinions. Again and again, you know the story. It's just this same old. Again and again, they would say, where is God? Is the Lord with us or not? Exodus 17:7. Just as we say, is the Lord with us or not? Or so it feels. And he would say, am I with you? I'm bearing you as on eagle's wings. Through one trial after another, I come through again and again and again as we trudge through this wilderness to the promised land. Sometimes it sure didn't feel like he was bearing them as on eagle's wings, but in hindsight, they could always see it. They just had to look back. And Moses would continually remind them, or really, they just had to look down at their feet. For 40 years, as you know, it says, their sandals did not wear out, nor did their feet swell. Why was that? Well, it was because through their blood, sweat, and tears, he was indeed bearing them on eagle's wings, and there's proof positive. And their sandals and their very feet were signs of the abiding presence of his continuing deliverance. Couldn't be more plain. Just as we see signs of his presence. I'm sure most of you have heard the story of the man who is standing at heaven's gates and he's looking back over the path of his life, and it seems there were two set of footprints on all the highways. There was God's footprints next to his, but in all the valleys there was only one set of footprints, right? Why, he asked, why did you leave me alone when things were at their worst? Said the Father, the footprints were mine. I did not leave you. Oh no, I carried you. It's true for you and me. Once the valley of the shadow of death is behind you, when you look back, you can always see that. Can't you? Single set of footprints. You see that he was there in so many ways. And so often in the midst of the valley, he makes that clear. And I'm here to tell you today that if you don't, you will one day see it. That the Lord is near. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, Psalm 147:18. And he saves those who are crushed in spirit. He will. Maybe that's you today. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art indeed with me. For thus says the high and exalted one, Isaiah 57:15, who lives forever, whose name is holy. I dwell in a high and holy place, but also with the lowly and contrite of spirit, in order to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite. He's always just beneath the surface of things, waiting for us just to relax. To relax in his arms, to find what someone called rest beyond leisure, rest beyond pleasure, rest even in our pain, to take the labor out of our work. That's what he wants to do. As we simply realize that compared to what he does from the cradle to the grave, in so many ways, our work is rest. Our religion is done. Starting with our salvation from sin, and it's not by works. What does this mean in practice? Well, soon after the story I just told you about being on tilt and seeing the sunrise and all of that, Julie and I had an experience that I will never forget. We were hiking in the Rocky Mountain National Park, which is just a few miles from our home, with two of our kids. They were 3 and 4 years old. Cameron had yet to come. And it was way up at Emerald Lake, beautiful, pristine lake, and when we were having a picnic, and without warning, our picnic started to blow away. And all of a sudden, it got cold, and then came the wind and the rain, and then came the sleet and the snow in the middle of the summer. We should have known better. I know. At which we were not prepared for, and it went from summer to winter in a matter of minutes. We hadn't come dressed for this. And the kids were already coming down with colds. And, of course, we didn't want it to get any worse. And Julie had a bad back at the time, and we knew what was coming. And so I scooped both of the kids up, Jordan in one arm, Rachel, in the other arm, and started walking as fast as I could. But the weather got worse, and so I started jogging, and then it even got worse. And before we knew it, we were running as best we could down the mountain. And as I did, I learned a lesson I'll never forget. The kids didn't, exactly feel comfortable. Just like we don't always exactly feel comfortable. What's wrong, God? And in a way, you can't blame them. I mean, they were bouncing up and down, jostling, back and forth in this, vice grip of their father's arms, and for them it seemed like completely out of control, which it was out of their control, but not someone else. They were cold and damp and hungry and miserable, and it was miserable. It was about as much as they could possibly handle. But it was nothing compared to what it was like for me. Right? I wasn't exactly used to altitude. We had not been there long enough to develop the extra red blood cells that you do when you live at altitude. And I was not in very good shape at the time. And you know how it is when you really get winded, you start to almost taste blood. Or at least it seems like it. And your mouth gets like cotton and you can't even spit. Pretty bad. I guess it was good I couldn't do that because Julie was right behind me. But my arms were burning. I kept saying, "Burn, baby, burn," as though, being macho about it would help. And the kids were a little damp, but I was drenched. They were exasperated. I was exhausted. It's like the Nigerian proverb, "He who is being carried does not realize how far the town is." And as they struggled in my arms and as they cried, I thought, if they only knew what I was doing, what life would be like without my amazing grace and superabounding mercy and all that, if they only knew what they're doing would seem easy. Might even seem like resting, or it could be. But then I thought, God's probably thought the same thing about me. I wonder how often he thinks, if Brian only knew all that I'm doing, what he's doing would seem easier. Might even seem like resting if he'd let himself do that. And then I thought, listen to me, O house of Jacob, Isaiah 43:6, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, all the remnant of the house of Israel, you who have been born by me from birth and have been carried from the womb. Even to your old age, I will be the same. And even to your graying years, I will bear you. I have done it. I will carry you. And I will bear you, and I will deliver you. In many ways, the foundation of the Reformation is the rest ethic, and it's in the book of Hebrews. And God repeats it all through Scripture. So important is it. Again and again, he reminds us that by comparison to what he is doing, by comparison to what he has done, our work is rest. He's saying, through my works of creation, your life is in my hands, down to your each and every atom. Can you rest in that? And through my works of redemption, through the storms of life, through your every trial and tribulation, I have borne you as on eagle's wings. And I will bear you. He's saying, come unto me, all you who labor, and I will give you rest. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth. Thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine and 10,000s beside. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord, to me. What we have here is an offer of rest like on a silver platter. In his sovereign arms. The rest that can come if we hold fast to our confidence, Hebrews 3:6, and the boast of our hope firm until the end. No matter what happens, you can do it. You can do it because the work of creation is done, done, done. And the work of redemption is done, done, done. And the work of glorification is as good as done, done, done. It will happen. All through the work of the cross, where he said, it is finished. It is done. If you're anything like me, it's a truth that can take the world off your shoulders. According to Hebrews, all you need is the Protestant rest ethic to realize who he is as the creator and the sustainer and the redeemer. A realization that says, Jesus, I am resting in the joy of what thou art.